Cloud imaging or imaging via internet protocols like HTTP and HTTPS is not an entirely new idea. I mean, Apple have been doing this for years, but it's fairly new to the Microsoft stack. In this demo, I will show you two options for doing bare metal deployments over internet. First, via a setup of Microsoft Deployment Toolkit that has been extended with HTTPS support via an open source project named Powershell Deployment, and then using Config Manager Technical Preview. So, starting off with the PowerShell deployment version, what I have here is a virtual machine where I've just installed a standard installation of MDT, and I have run the installer that extends it with HTTP and HTTPS support. I have also added in an image, an operating system. I've created a sequence, and I have updated the deployment share so I get a boot media that I can use to start my deployment from. And this is something that all cloud imaging platforms has to work with in one way or another. You need to figure out a way to boot your machine. And it can be anything from using a USB stick with the boot media on it, or CD, God forbid, if you still are using those. Or you can have a local Pixie server, or you can have a Pixie referrer locally that simply refers a request to a internet-based iPixie server or something like that. But one way or another, you need to boot the machine on some form of boot media. So I have the server. This is a VM in Azure. It's not super fancy, but it's a good enough VM to host a deployment server. Has 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, a bit of SSDs. It's a good Azure VM. Now, if I go over to my host here on premise in Chicago, I can go to one of my VMs, this one here. This one is configured to start on that media, on that boot ISO, and start it. So Windows PA will load, and as soon as it loads, it will launch a PowerShell prompt or launch a PowerShell script, and eventually connect up to the VM in Azure. So after about 20-30 seconds, depending on how well connected you are to your Azure cloud, you will see a little wizard popping up eventually. Here you can see we're trying to access the Azure VM over HTTPS. So that means we also have a certificate in our boot image as well to be able to do that connection. And I'm connected. I'm going to pick one of my sequences. I only have one on this server. Pick a computer name and start my deployment. And from now on, this is just a regular standard MDT type deployment, running a sequence, create some volumes, download a Vim file, apply drivers, etc., etc. What we have done though that is a little bit different compared to how MDT normally does this, when we are downloading drivers, we are not downloading individual files. They are always created as an archive on the server first. In this example, a zip file, so we download a single file rather than 1,000 of small files. It's just more effective or efficient over internet. But after about 20 minutes, this machine is going to be fully imaged with whatever Windows 10 image I had. And I require absolutely no local infrastructure for this. So we're not going to wait for that one. I'm just going to power it off for now. And we're going to go over to Config Manager instead. So here I have a technical preview. It's running version 2007. The feature to deploy over internet came in technical preview 2005, but I've upgraded this one since. Like my MDT server, I have a few sequences. This is an older image, but we're going to use that one. I have a boot image, I have an OS image, and instead of using regular driver packages, I'm using legacy packages for my drivers. It's more effective that way. So in my packages node, I have a driver for a Dell model here, for example. This platform is also configured with a CMG. So I have a cloud management gateway set up, which is a requirement to be able to do this. And what's going to happen is when I do deployment, the content is going to come from the cloud. But unlike the MDT/Powershell solution, currently the boot image that you create, the client that you boot must have a temporary access to a local management point first. So that's a bit of a downside, but that's how it currently works. So you need to have some sort of VPN connection, a VPN router or something like that, so that the client can start to find a management point to know that it's supposed to go out on the internet to get the rest of the content, all the packages from a cloud management gateway. So if I go to one of my clients, I'm gonna pick one of my VMs here, gonna apply a clean snapshot of it, and I'm gonna move it to a location where I can access the on-premise management point. That will be Liverpool. And I'm just gonna do a Pixie boot from a local Pixie server on this particular network. I could also have booted from an ISO file, since this is a VM, or a USB stick if this would be a physical computer. So anyway, it's connecting now, or shortly, to my local management point. It sees the sequences that I have deployed. In this environment, I have a 1809 sequence. And click Next. Check all the packages, starts the deployment. And what we will see shortly if I open up the command prompt here and open cmtrace and open up the SMS TS log file from the temp folder, you will see that the packages are actually not coming from a local management point. They are indeed coming from the CMG blobs up on Azure. And you can actually see these packages if you want in the Storage Explorer, for example. So if I go to my Azure portal, let's see, here, go to my storage account for my technical preview CMG. I actually have two of them, one for regular config manager and one for the previews. And I can go to Storage Explorer, and this is where you will see all the various packages that have been uploaded from config manager to Azure. So here, for example, I have my client setup. There's the upgrade package. Here is one of my boot images. Here is my OS image, but they're all there. And now imaging and all the content are coming down from the cloud instead of coming from a local distribution point. So that's pretty cool. If you want to read up a little bit more on this, if you go to my blog, search for, if you go to deployment research and search for the magic keyword cloud, you will find 3 different posts related to cloud imaging. Part 1 is how you can run sequences from Intune or Microsoft Intune. Number 2 is how to use the Powershell extension to MDT that I showed you, so you can do bare metal deployment over internet that way. And the final one was the setup to do the same thing over config manager. That's all for now. Back to the webcast.